Imagine you're playing this massive, incredibly detailed, open-world video game. The graphics are stunning, the mechanics are flawless, but there's this one major catch.
Okay, I'm listening.
Your game is permanently locked in tutorial mode. So you have, like, infinite health, a bottomless inventory of resources, and every single enemy you encounter instantly just drops their weapons and surrenders.
Wow. Sounds pretty easy.
Right. It's literally impossible for your character to take a single point of damage. You cannot lose. And I know what you're thinking out there listening to this. That sounds incredibly relaxing.
Oh, yeah. For about, what, 10 minutes?
Exactly. And then what happens?
Well, eventually, the lack of stakes just drains all the color from the experience, right? You realize that without the possibility of failure, your choices don't carry any weight.
Not at all.
There's no thrill in victory if defeat was never actually on the table. You'd ultimately just put the controller down and walk away from sheer boredom.
Because a game without friction is a game without a point. And yet, when we look at our own actual lives, we constantly find ourselves wishing we were playing on tutorial mode. We just want the easy path.
We really do. We fight so hard against the friction.
We do. So, welcome to a brand new deep dive. Today, we are tackling one of humanity's oldest, most universal, and frankly, most frustrating questions. If the universe or, a higher power or whatever fundamental force you happen to believe in is intrinsically good,
Right.
why does life have to be so incredibly hard? Like, why the constant suffering, the maddening uncertainty, the endless struggle just to keep our heads above water?
It's the ultimate question.
It really is. And we custom-tailored this deep dive for you today because we know you don't just want platitudes. You love a good paradigm-shifting aha moment that just cuts right through all that noise of conventional wisdom.
And I have to say, the source material we're unpacking today delivers a rather profound shift in perspective. It really flips things upside down.
It totally does. So what exactly are we looking at today?
Well, we are looking at excerpts from a deeply philosophical and cosmological text called the Urantia Book. And specifically, we're focusing on a section from paper 3, which is titled The Attributes of God.
Okay, the attributes of God.
Yeah, and our specific lens for this conversation is a conceptual framework that scholars of this text refer to as the Nine Necessities.
The Nine Necessities.
Yeah.
So going back to that video game analogy for a second, the text introduces this entire framework with a single phrase that just, it hits like a ton of bricks. It says, all evolutionary creature life is beset by certain inevitabilities.
Beset by inevitabilities. That's such a heavy phrase.
Right. The key word there is beset. It essentially means you cannot hack the system to avoid the hard stuff. The friction isn't a glitch, it's a feature.
And that framing represents the crucial transition we really need to make right at the start of this discussion. Usually when we encounter hardship like a job loss, an illness, a broken relationship, our default psychological reaction is to view that suffering as a defect of life.
We think, oh man, something has gone terribly wrong here. The universe is broken.
Exactly. But the authors of this text do not view suffering as a punishment. They don't frame it as divine indifference or some random cosmic accident. They actually frame adversity as a structural revelation.
A structural revelation. I love that.
Yeah, we are being asked to move from viewing the friction of life as a defect in the system to seeing it as the actual intentional design required for creating experiential character.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I can already hear the objections from you guys listening, and I feel the need to push back on your behalf.
Go for it.
Isn't this just a highly philosophical, maybe overly intellectual way of justifying terrible things? We've all heard the classic cliche, right? Oh, your car broke down, you got evicted, and your dog ran away. Well, cheer up. It builds character.
Right, the toxic positivity angle.
Exactly. It can sound dangerously close to brushing off genuine human trauma and making light of real tragedy.
And what's fascinating here is how the text carefully avoids falling into that dismissive trap. It is absolutely not arguing that evil is inherently good.
No.
Nor is it suggesting that we should, celebrate tragedy. Instead, it's pointing out the mandatory environmental medium that is absolutely required for any kind of authentic freedom and moral growth to occur.
So it's about the environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
The foundational premise is that evolving beings must be entirely fallible if they are to be genuinely free. And to explain this, the authors use a very rigorous logical formula.
They do, yeah. It's almost mathematical.
It really is. They pose a sequence of questions that follow a specific pattern. It basically goes, is a particular desirable human trait desirable? If so, then a specific, challenging environmental condition absolutely must exist to allow it.
So it's a strict mechanism of cause and effect. Like if you
Yeah.
want the product of X, you simply must endure the manufacturing process of Y.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. The text presents 9 specific spiritual and psychological qualities that represent the absolute pinnacle of human development. And then it systematically illustrates how every single one of those qualities requires a specific adversarial environment to emerge. Remove the adversity, and you mathematically remove the possibility of the virtue ever existing.
Which brings us to the first grouping of these necessities, what we can think of as the inner forge.
The inner forge. I like that.
Yeah, these are the internal, deeply personal capacities. We're talking courage, hope, faith, and pleasure. So let's start with courage.
Okay.
The text states, is courage strength of character desirable? Then must a man be reared in an environment which necessitates grappling with hardships and reacting to disappointments.
It serves as a really stark reality check, doesn't it? Hardship and disappointment are not incidental side effects of living on Earth. They are the required soil for bravery.
The required soil.
Yeah, I mean, think about it realistically. A life with 0 adversity, 0 threat, and 0 disappointment produces 0 courageous beings.
Because there's nothing to be brave against.
Right. It is logically impossible to possess courage if there is nothing to fear and absolutely nothing to overcome. Bravery in a perfectly safe world is just empty pantomime.
It makes me think of physical exercise, like the basic laws of biology. You don't build physical strength by just sitting on your couch and simply deciding, hey, I want to be strong today.
You wish you could.
Oh, I really wish. But no, you have to literally tear your muscle fibers through resistance training.
Yeah.
You need gravity. You need those heavy iron weights actively pushing back against your effort.
That's a great analogy.
Right. Adversity, in this context, is the literal resistance training for human character.
And that physical resistance analogy translates beautifully into the psychological realm, especially when we look at the second necessity in this inner forge, which is hope.
Hope.
The text asks if hope, which it wonderfully describes as the grandeur of trust, is desirable. If the answer is yes, then human existence must constantly be confronted with insecurities and recurrent uncertainties.
And uncertainty is like the one thing we spend our entire adult lives trying to eliminate.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we buy insurance, we obsess over our schedules, we check our bank accounts constantly. We just hate the unknown.
We despise it because it causes anxiety. However, the text frames hope not as some fluffy, passive, wishful thinking. It's not like hoping it doesn't rain on your picnic.
Right, it's not blind optimism.
Exactly. It frames it as a muscular, active spiritual capacity. You cannot build a muscular, resilient trust if you always know exactly what is going to happen next. Hope is forged exclusively through a sustained, conscious confrontation with the unknown.
That tension, it naturally leads right into the third trait, which is faith. So the text asks, is faith, the supreme assertion of human thought, desirable? Then must the mind of man find itself in that troublesome predicament where it ever knows less than it can believe.
A troublesome predicament indeed.
I am mildly obsessed with that phrase, troublesome predicament, because let's be honest, it is incredibly troublesome.
It's exhausting.
It is. But if you pause and really think about the mechanics of it, like if we possessed perfect, undeniable, absolute knowledge of everything in the universe, wouldn't faith just become a boring mathematical certainty?
It would vanish entirely. There is 0 room for faith in a calculator.
Right. 2 + 2 is 4. You don't need faith for that.
Exactly. Faith grows exactly in the cognitive gap between what is empirically known and what can be spiritually or morally believed. A mind equipped with perfect knowledge has 0 capacity for living faith.
So the uncertainty isn't a barrier.
No, the uncertainty isn't a barrier to faith at all. It is the empty space that faith is explicitly required to fill.
That's powerful. Rounding out this inner forge is something we all actually want, which is pleasure.
Oh, yes.
The text asks if pleasure is desirable, and then it firmly states that man must live in a world where the alternative of pain and the likelihood of suffering are ever-present experiential possibilities.
It's the ultimate principle of contrast. We tend to think of pleasure as an isolated event, like we can just have it on its own.
To give you the good stuff.
Right, but it is deeply relational. The profound sweetness of deep rest after exhausting, back-breaking labor, or the profound peace that washes over you after surviving a really bitter struggle.
Yeah.
Those sensations simply cannot be genuinely felt in a vacuum. They derive their depth and their meaning entirely against the stark backdrop of their opposites.
It's the difference between taking a sip of water when you're already perfectly hydrated versus drinking a glass of water after walking 10 miles through a scorching desert.
Exactly. The water itself hasn't changed.
No, the water's the same, but your experiential capacity to enjoy it has been massively expanded by the suffering that preceded it.
Precisely.
But we don't live our lives in a vacuum. These internal traits inevitably bleed into how we interact with the rest of the world. And that brings us to the second grouping, the social crucible. This covers altruism, the love of truth, idealism, loyalty, and unselfishness.
And this is where the underlying logic of the text becomes, I think, significantly more challenging. It forces us to look at a deeply flawed, broken societal structure and see the mandatory opportunities hidden within those fractures.
Yeah, here's where it gets really interesting and honestly, maybe a bit controversial.
Let's hear it.
Let's talk about altruism. The text asks, is altruism service of one's fellows desirable? Then must life experience provide for encountering situations of social inequality?
Yes.
Now wait, hold on. Inequality is universally viewed by modern society as the ultimate systemic failure. We spend billions of dollars, endless political capital, trying to eradicate it. Is this text seriously suggesting that we need inequality and implying we shouldn't try to fix it just so some people can practice being altruistic?
See, this raises a really important question, and we have to parse the philosophical nuance of this specific point very carefully so we don't misinterpret the core message.
Right, because it sounds pretty harsh at first glance.
It does, but the authors are absolutely not advocating for the creation or the maintenance of oppressive inequality. They are making a cold, structural observation about how human character originates. The experiential emergence of genuine altruism, like that initial act of self-giving love, it relies entirely on uneven ground as its starting point. You simply cannot practice the act of lifting someone up if everyone is already standing on the exact same plateau.
Okay, I see the distinction. So it's not declaring that inequality is the goal.
No, not at all.
It's observing that in a naturally evolving, imperfect world where disparities organically exist, that uneven ground serves as the required stage on which altruism first learns to perform.
That is precisely the right way to view it. Perfect, mandated equality across the board removes the situational necessity for service.
That makes a lot of sense.
And navigating that uneven ground, trying to genuinely understand and help people, naturally forces you to confront the second social necessity, which is the love of truth.
The love of truth.
Yeah, the text argues that if the willingness to go wherever truth leads is desirable, then man must grow up in a world where error is deeply embedded and falsehood is always a looming possibility.
Because truth-seeking have absolutely no value in a world where the truth is just handed to you on a silver platter.
Exactly.
You don't get a medal for navigating a maze if there's only one straight hallway and no dead ends. The presence of lies, propaganda, honest mistakes, all of that is the fog that forces you to develop an internal compass.
And once you develop that compass, once you learn to actually identify truth amidst the fog of error, it naturally sparks a new psychological reaction, which is idealism.
Oh, idealism, right.
The text says, is idealism the approaching concept of the divine desirable? Then must man struggle in an environment of relative goodness and beauty. Notice the word relative there.
Right, relative meaning not perfect.
Yeah.
When you see the errors and the flaws in the world, you naturally notice the agonizing gap between how things are right now and how they could be.
Yes, that gap.
That gap is the birthplace of idealism. We need an imperfect world to stimulate that irrepressible reach for better things. Like, if society was already a flawless utopia, we would have no reason to innovate, no reason to create art, really no reason to strive at all.
We would just stagnate completely, Holding on to those ideals when the world inevitably pushes back requires the next necessity, which is loyalty.
Loyalty.
And the text makes a profound statement here. It says, the valor of devotion to duty consists in the implied danger of default. Meaning, loyalty is only authentic when disloyalty, betrayal, and desertion are genuinely viable options.
That concept hits incredibly close to home. Like, think about a whistleblower in a corrupt corporation.
Okay, good example.
If they speak up because they literally have no other choice, it's just self-preservation. But if they're offered, say, a massive bribe to look the other way, if they have a wide open door to betray their ideals and get rich doing it, and they still choose to expose the truth, that is valor.
That is true loyalty.
Loyalty absolutely requires that open door. It requires the active, daily temptation to just walk away. Otherwise, devotion is just default behavior.
And the temptation to walk away usually comes from our own internal desires, which brings us to the final necessity in this social crucible, unselfishness.
Unselfishness.
The text notes that mortal man must live face to face with the incessant clamoring of an inescapable self for recognition and honor. It points out that an individual could not dynamically choose a higher path or a divine life if there were no self-life to forsake.
The incessant clamoring of an inescapable self.
Quite a phrase.
I don't think I've ever heard a more accurate description of the modern human ego.
It's so true.
We all have that incredibly loud, annoying roommate living inside our heads, constantly demanding to be recognized, validated, and catered to. But the text is completely flipping the script on how we view that ego.
It really is.
It's saying this incessant clamoring isn't a psychological mistake. It's the required sparring partner. There can be no victory of unselfishness if there's no selfish ego standing in the ring to be conquered.
So, having mapped out this entire landscape, all 9 of these necessities spanning from internal courage to outward unselfishness, the conversation naturally forces us to run a cosmic thought experiment.
Okay, let's hear it.
What would a living being look like if they somehow managed to skip all these steps? What if you bypassed the pain, the uncertainty, the ego, the inequality, and you were simply created completely perfect from day one?
Basically, what if you just spawned right at the finish line?
Exactly. And the Urantia book anticipates this exact question and provides a very direct contrast. It introduces the concept of the Havona beings.
The Havona beings?
Yeah, in the vast cosmology of this particular text, Havona is the eternal, absolutely perfect central universe. And the beings who reside there are endowed with perfection by their very nature. They didn't evolve, they were just created flawless.
So they're the ones actually playing the game on tutorial mode.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. And the text goes out of its way to explicitly contrast these perfect Havona beings with evolutionary humanity.
How so?
Well, it notes that these central beings are inherently kind, but they are not altruistic in the human sense, because they have never once encountered a situation of inequality that actually required them to sacrifice.
Wow.
They are naturally brave, but they are not courageous because they have never possessed a mind capable of experiencing blinding fear in the face of hardship.
So they don't know what it means to be absolutely terrified, to feel your knees literally shaking, and to force yourself to take a step forward anyway.
They cannot comprehend it. They are fundamentally loyal by design, but they have never experienced the intoxicating thrill of remaining devoted while staring down a massive, genuine temptation to betray a friend.
Because they don't have that temptation.
Right. They enjoy a constant state of pleasure, but they possess zero comprehension of the deep, overwhelming sweetness that comes from escaping intense pain. Everything that evolutionary humans are forced to earn through blood, sweat, and agonizing tears, these Havona beings simply possess by nature.
It's the ultimate contrast between, like, someone born with a massive cosmic trust fund and a gritty, self-made entrepreneur.
That's a perfect way to put it.
The trust fund kid has everything handed to them. They live in a flawless mansion. Their bank accounts are overflowing, but they didn't build any of it. They don't genuinely understand the value of a single dollar because they never had to skip a meal just to make rent.
Exactly.
Evolutionary humans, on the other hand, are the self-made entrepreneurs of the universe. We start with absolutely nothing in this harsh, unforgiving environment, and we have to literally earn every single ounce of our character.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it becomes so clear how this paradigm completely flips traditional theological and philosophical narratives completely upside down.
It really does.
For centuries, countless traditions have taught that human imperfection is a tragic glitch, that our flawed nature is a sin, a historical fall from grace, or some cosmic mistake that needs to be constantly apologized for.
Yeah, that we're fundamentally broken.
But this text forcefully argues the exact opposite. Our imperfection is not a glitch. It is the necessary starting line. It is the intentional, brilliant design for creatures who are meant to forge their own character in a state of absolute, undeniable freedom.
So the struggle is the whole point.
Yes. The experiential, agonizing path through these 9 necessities produces a depth of character that endowed perfection simply cannot replicate.
It produces a character forged in the fires of genuine freedom, which, when you really let it sink in, is incredibly empowering.
It transforms the entire human narrative. We are no longer a tragedy of fallen beings trying to get back to a lost Eden. We are an epic of ascending creatures building something entirely new.
So let's bring this massive cosmic scale philosophy back down to the reality of your daily commute, your stressful job, and your complex relationships. What does this all mean for you listening to this right now?
That's the million-dollar question.
It means that the daily frustrations that make you want to scream, the betrayals you suffer at the hands of others, the insecurities that keep you staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m., and that constant nagging ego that always wants to be the center of attention, none of these things are signs that you're failing at life.
No, they aren't.
They are not indicators that the universe is broken or that you are somehow being punished. They are simply the raw materials. They are the exact 9 ingredients required to build a genuinely dynamic free will character.
They're the mandatory conditions of your freedom.
So here is a very direct, practical application for you to try this week. The next time you face a massive disappointment or you find yourself entirely gripped by paralyzing uncertainty about your future, force yourself to stop for just 1 second.
Just pause.
Yet, try to spot which of the 9 necessities is actively asking to be built in that exact moment. Is this painful situation demanding courage? Is this terrifying uncertainty simply asking you to build some muscular hope? Start treating the adversity you face not as a personal attack from the universe, but as the required gym equipment for your character.
Reframing your daily struggles as resistance training for your soul is perhaps the most practical takeaway possible. And the source text offers one final, rather profound observation on this entire evolutionary process. It notes that mortal man must ultimately earn his entire status in the universe by his own faith and hope.
Earn his entire status. Which leaves us with a genuinely fascinating, lingering question for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends. We've established that human character is something you must actively earn through this brutal obstacle course of necessities, rather than something granted to you by passive grace. But why? If we spend our entire earthly lives sweating, struggling, and bleeding to forge this unique, battle-tested character— if we put in all that effort, what is it ultimately for? Does this incredibly hard-earned human character give us a unique capability, perhaps a specific future job or cosmic destiny, that even those perfect trust fund beings in the center of the universe aren't qualified to handle?
It makes you wonder.
Think about it. You might not just be surviving this obstacle course. You might be training for a role only a self-made soul could ever fill. Keep earning it.